Nick, we've learned a lot here at Big Ten Media Days. Like, Jedd Fisch doesn't want any transfers?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff, and next to me, this is great, is Nick Lemkau. And we got a tremendous show coming at all you everydayers out there on this Friday, where, as you can see, for all of our everydayers here on YouTube, we are somewhat live at Big Ten Media Days here in Chicago, and we just learned so much from Jedd Fisch, Washington's players that are here as well. So a little bit later on, we'll talk about some of the other things like Champ Taulealea, who is now the strong favorite to be the starting right guard, some injury updates, some different things like that. But Nick, I think the biggest thing that everyone took away from Jedd Fisch's time at the podium is that he said that he wants to get the transfer number at Washington down to 0. And I think you and I are in agreement on this. I don't think that's ever going to happen, first of all.
Yeah, in this day and age in college football, I don't think it's something that is realistic, but I think it's more the message that he's sending with that. This continues to be a program that he wants to build through recruiting, and he's talked about that ever since day one, Big Ten Media Days inside Lucas Oil Stadium 2 years ago. Well, I guess 3 seasons ago in 2024.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's gone fast, though. That was the main thing. It was we're going to treat the recruiting like the NFL draft, and we're going to draft our players that we know we want and the type of player that we want to get. So I think the message is what he's sending today at Big Ten Media Days is more so along the lines of we're still continuing to prioritize the recruiting process, the type of player we want to get. Transfer portal, they want it to be more of a supplementary thing. Ideally, getting it down to 0, I just don't think is possible. I mean, you look at some of the transfers this team brought in this year, just at key positions. I mean, you bring in a punter in Hunter Green. That's something that you really needed to address in the offseason. You know, Elijah Brown at quarterback, someone to come in and really boost the competition deep in the quarterback room. Christian Moss, someone to, supplement Desmond Roebuck in the slot and maybe have a replacement skill set for what Denzel Boston was. Obviously very difficult to replace a player like that. And then Jayden Limar in a running back room. We're going to get to that in a little bit, but you're always going to have to address certain things in the transfer portal, but it's more the sentiment of continuing to focus on this being a process of treating recruiting like the NFL draft, supplementing that with the transfer portal.
So I like that those are the names you mentioned specifically, because I got a chance to talk to Jedd Fisch this morning, and we spent a lot of time talking about the defensive line, and he's very quick to talk about Deshaun Watts, Darren Conley, Kai McClendon, Logan George, all these other transfers, Emmanuel Carnley being another. And these are guys who are going to start or play big time roles in the rotation this year. And so it's one of those things where it's not feasible to completely shut that part out of your program. Shout out to Dabo Swinney, who's trying to do that, and just, that's its own disaster. But I think that it's something where when I hear that, it's just something that, as you said, it plays back into his vision, and it's okay. Yeah. I want to sit here and be able to just completely build my team through, as he calls it, the NFL draft. Right. Mm-hmm. And to the names that you just mentioned on that list, you talk about Hunter Green. Okay, Washington went out and got the number 1 high school punter in Nolan Balke. You talk about a guy like Elijah Brown, where Washington is certainly expecting big things from Blake Roscoff as soon as he steps on campus. Jayden Limar, you recruited 2 running backs in each of your first couple of cycles. I don't think that'll be the case this year. And so it's something where, I understand the point of these comments. And of course, he talked about money and NIL, and I think that's a discussion we should have as well over the course of this show. But the more I look at just kind of what Jedd Fisch wants to do and what his plan is, for anybody out there who might be panicking and saying well, no, this isn't a good idea, this isn't what the modern world of college football is, I don't believe that that's something that, as long as he is at Washington, however long that might be, I don't think that's ever something we're actually going to see.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you talk about modern college football. The best programs in college football are the ones that are recruiting at the highest level and supplementing through the transfer portal. I mean, you look at, a team like Indiana has done a really good job of developing who they had originally, but also going to the transfer portal. I guess that's not a great example, but teams like Ohio State that recruit at a high level and then supplement via the transfer portal. These are kind of the recipe in the Big Ten, I think, for
Georgia is another good example of that.
Yeah, it's just teams that I think prioritize recruiting and supplement via the transfer portal. And I just went back and looked at the numbers going back a few years. Washington brought in 14 transfers this year. According to On3, the number was 19 the year before and 34 in 2024. Obviously, the 2024 season was a much different situation given what they had to rebuild in Seattle. But that number is coming down. And like you mentioned, talking about some of the key transfers they brought in this year, what they've done in recruiting to kind of match that. Or you mentioned the punter. They go get a good transfer punter. Now they've recruited one of the top punters. They've recruited
long snapper too. Same thing.
Long snapper, same thing. So and a quarterback too. You go get an Elijah Brown, and then you go recruit a really good guy in 2027. So you're seeing kind of that priority in the transfer portal be targeted, but then they're going into the recruiting ranks and finding that player at the high school level. And I think the recruiting staff has done a really good job of identifying what that the recruiting staff and the transfer portal evaluations have done a really good job of evaluating what the team needs and translating it from the transfer portal acquisitions to let's go find that guy in high school. And that's what I think that you're seeing with this coaching staff right now. And that's why Jedd Fisch goes out on the main podium and says something like that. I think it's a sentiment to what this team wants to become.
So I think it also has a lot to do with the NIL thing, right? Where Jedd Fisch gets up here and says, oh, I've seen these valuations where I know we've talked about it on the show. I think it was Front Office Sports who had Washington's roster valued around $28 million. And that's something where you and I have talked about it on the show that is not the case. And our everydayers out there have known that's not the case for a very long time. And now it's nice to hear that extra confirmation of that, where most of that is being allocated to high school recruiting as well, because again, that's where the focus is to go get. I think the Cody Greens of the world might be a bad example because you're going to need that kind of money to go after him. But being a local kid might be, this is the best way to put it. Trey Moore, Jordan Clay, to go get those types of players out of Texas. Trez Davis out of Louisiana. You look at getting a Sincere Gaylord, who is a West Coast kid, but getting him back out of Florida. Like those
Mason
are the kinds.
James,
Mason James.
in Oklahoma.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the kinds of battles that you need to go out and win to be able to supplement this program with the high-end talent to compete with the best in the Big Ten. And on top of that, that's where a lot of your money is going to go. And when you hear Jedd Fisch talk about his NFL draft versus free agency approach, that's what so much of this is, and that's what I hear whenever he talks about that sort of thing. And he's going to continue to talk about, hey, we need more money. Hey, we need more this. And that's true. Washington absolutely does need more to be able to compete at that highest level. But at the same time, it's also just, I think when, people hear that, especially as it relates to the transfer portal, part of that is also because of the approach.
One of the things Jedd Fisch said was this team was not bought, it was built.
Yes.
And that's, I think, going along with what you've said, yes, the money situation could be better. Jedd Fisch has said that. Obviously, you always want to be improving in that regard in terms of NIL, in terms of what you can give your players. But it's key to note that this team is built and there's a construction of it based on the quality of player that they want to bring in. And that's been the same thing year over year. And it goes back to building this program out of the high school ranks instead of the transfer portal. And one thing Curt Cignetti said is that, kind of related to this, is that, the players that have proven themselves, they're the ones that are going to get paid.
Yeah.
And I think that as Washington, works its way up in terms of its NIL, its compensation, that kind of thing, you're going to see that some of the best players are going to get paid and they're going to catch up in that regard. But as of now, this is a really quality young team that returns 20 starters from last year to this year's team out of the 22 starters, something Jedd Fisch said this morning. It has a lot of experience, also a lot of, talent in a lot of the position rooms, but it is still one of the youngest teams in the Big Ten and in the country.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that kind of go along with how this NIL thing works out in terms of player experience and production and things like that.
So I love a couple of your thoughts there, and I'll respond on the other side of the break. Which one's first? Locked On Huskies is brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, if you think you know who's hitting a homer today, FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game. If you're right, you'll receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. Best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season. Daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep. Now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. And that's something where I was at the White Sox game yesterday, and Murataka Murakami, that dude, he does nothing but hit dingers. And watching guys like him, Shohei Ohtani, whenever I watch the Red Sox, Wilson Contreras is somebody who I'm always looking at to hit a dinger every single night. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting the homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. So, Nick, I love where you're going with a lot of this. I also think back to, because you're talking about Curt Cignetti's comments about players, once they produce, they'll get paid. I go back to something where I think it was on signing day this past year, where Jedd Fisch talked about, we are going to allocate a little bit more of our salary cap, our budget towards freshmen to get them in the door, to make sure that we can get them there. And then, obviously we're going to try to retain top talent, something else he spent a lot of time talking about today. And you immediately think of John Mills, Desmond Roebuck, Ryland Dillard-Allen, your trio of freshman All-Americans, Zajius Rainey-Saleh, Dylan Robinson, these kinds of high-end talents who it's very clear are going to play big parts of this. I'm excluding Champ Taulealea since we'll talk about him later. But I think it's something that is just such a very interesting part of this approach, and something that just seems very different, right? Because there are so many programs that are, we got to rely really heavily on the transfer portal. Like Purdue is a very extreme example in that regard, but they brought in 83 transfers over the last couple of years. Yeah. So there are things like that certainly need to be, I don't want to say emphasized, but acknowledged in that regard. And I think that just looking at the way that Washington and Jedd Fisch have built this roster, it's so interesting to think about, especially as we sit here. And we had that conversation earlier this week about the Huskies having the third youngest roster in the Big Ten. Like these are things that are such an important part of just what Jedd Fisch wants to do, because you look all over this depth chart and it's junior, senior, especially along the offensive line, right? But there's so many other positions where, there's going to be 3 or 4 freshmen in this rotation. Like I did my depth chart predictions on a show the other day, and I had 9 true and redshirt freshmen in the rotation. Like that's a significant amount still. And that's without discounting true sophomores, redshirt sophomores, guys who maybe haven't necessarily played a large amount as well. Just looking at, where this is going to be in year 3, especially with the expectations that are around this program. Like just a teaser for all the everydayers out there. Like Damon Williams was sitting in that chair not too long ago, and he said, we got big goals this year. And I just said, what are they? He said, national championship. Like that's what this team expects. I'm not saying that that's how far they're going to get this year, but this team has set big goals for themselves.
Yeah, and I'm just looking back at, you talk about these young players that are going to fill out the roster. I think it was a show we did a few days ago. There are 5 expected second-year or younger players that are going to start on offense.
Yeah.
And there's 3 on defense. But if you go to the depth, I mean, you could add 5 or 6 more guys on the depth that you'll see on the 2-deep depth chart come the first week of the season that are freshman or sophomore. And it goes to that kind of same thing where the staff is prioritizing what it wants in the high school ranks. And I think you continue to see that with its reliance upon some of these guys that come in and make immediate impacts when they show up, like Desmond Roebuck, who this morning Jedd Fisch was asked about him, and he said, Des is an awesome human being. He's a guy that does everything right. And you really see that when we talked to Desmond earlier this spring, the way he handles, there was a lot of media there for that day of practice, and he handles it like a veteran. I mean, he's a second-year guy who this is his first spring practice, and he handles that at a high level. Yeah. He looks like, even though it's his second season, I mean, he looks like a 3 or 4 year starter out there, and that's why he was a freshman All-American last season. So again, it's this prioritization of some of these younger guys and getting them in the door right away and available to play right away. So I am interested in what the dynamic is going to be when we talk about NIL, when we talk about how some of this allocation is going to go to some of the recruits to get guys in the door. What's that going to be? How's that going to relate to, or how's it going to compare to some of the players who have the increased production that, can now deserve to get paid? Versus a guy when you want to go get a 5-star, what's the difference there?
No, I love this, because this is the thing, right? And this is why the 0 transfers is never going to happen, because there is going to be a point where with these guys that you're talking about who do produce and are, slated to make a whole bunch more sophomores, it's okay. This other guy who maybe was brought in at a similar rate and isn't producing in the same light, or one of these older guys who is like expected to be part of the rotation. I don't, I'm not saying this is speculation or anything. A Paul Menke type of player, if you will, somebody who we expect to be in the rotation and could certainly take a big step forward and contribute. Somebody like that might say, oh, well, I have an opportunity to go start maybe at, to bring in Zach Henning, Pocky Finau as examples at a slightly lower level. Like, you are going to have to supplement that depth somehow. And that's not always going to be able to come through the high school ranks for one way or another, because I asked Jedd Fisch about this morning. And when he was talking with me, he said, yeah, we are recruiting guys that we expect to be able to play right away. We can't always take a risk on dudes who, they've got the right body type, and maybe 2-3 years down the line, they're going to be the type of players who we expect to be part of this rotation. But no, it's guys who are going to play right away. And I think that's a great way to just kind of take a step forward and look at some of the other things that you and I have learned today, because I think that running back is something where the reports on Jordan Washington at this point in time aren't necessarily super positive. That wasn't a discussion that he and I were able to have, but I know he talked with our good buddy Christian Capel about that. And it doesn't sound like we're going to see a lot, if any, Jordan Washington over the course of the year, and bringing a guy like Ansu Sanoe, who is able to physically be able to help out with that. That's great. And again, it plays into this conversation perfectly because Jayden Limar is good to go. Jedd Fisch told me that Trey Cooley is about 90% right now. So those are guys that are going to be in the rotation in some way. Quaid Carr is somebody they're very excited about. Brian Bonner being another name as well that we've just heard so much about. Like, it plays into this discussion about the transfer portal, but it's also, okay, this is what we know about this year and how the transfer portal has helped this team.
Yeah, so the running back situation is one that I've talked about a few different times over the summer as it's a concern for me. I know you bring in Oregon's fourth leading rusher in Jayden Limar, who's productive. He's played in 33 games, and he does bring that experience. And I'd like to know what Jedd Fisch thinks about how did they get the guy that they want in him? Is he going to step in? And it's one of the things I'm going to ask him later this afternoon. What kind of player did they get, and did he kind of fill the footsteps of what was there previously? Obviously, it's very difficult to replace a guy like Jonah Coleman or even an Adam Muhammad, but just in terms of that veteran kind of presence, even with Trey Cooley as well. I mean, this running back room needs it, because especially without a guy like Jordan Washington, who it seems like we're not going to see this fall, there needs to be some veteran presence in there, whether it's the starter or whether it's a guy that can at least push some of the competition in that room, like you mentioned in Ansu Sanoe, who really played at a high level this spring because of those increased reps.
Yeah.
And Brian Bonner, I thought, played pretty well. Quaid Carr is another guy who's probably going to be in that rotation. The running back room is really interesting, because going back to this spring,
taking this serious,
I think
so
he'll
probably go downstairs.
We kind of, reading the tea leaves, I think you could kind of see that this running back room was going to rely on some of its younger players, just because of the uncertainty with Jordan Washington, the way the coaching staff talked about him. It seemed like he might not be ready. Even at the spring game, Jedd was still unsure, and now obviously we hear that he's probably not going to be ready to play this season. There is going to be an increased reliance on some of these guys, and it's a good thing they did get those increased reps this spring.
Absolutely, and it's something where I think that Brian Bonner is just kind of the X factor in this room for me, because that's somebody who just very clearly came in with such high expectations, right? Whether it be the recruiting ranking, the battle that it took to win out for his services, but on top of that, that's just a dude who's a high caliber athlete that was running sub 10 500-yard dashes in high school, and just also fits this scheme so well. And it was something where very early on, I think we saw so much of that learning process that we hear so much about from Jedd Fisch every spring of, oh yeah, this is a guy that we really like, but he was just so used to, when you go and you look at the high school film, just taking carries off tackle and turning upfield. Like that's not the way that he's going to be able to win at this level, because there are very few, if anybody, who can win in the Big Ten by just simply doing that. And so as we saw his vision and his just comfortability in this wide zone scheme improve throughout spring practice, I think that's a guy that I'm really watching this fall. And that's why we've spent so much time talking about not just this room, but him in particular, is because that player in particular, if we see him take that step forward over the summer, and it's okay, he got stronger, he got more confident, he got more comfortable running this scheme. Like, this isn't, I don't think either you or I expect one player to take 150 plus carries in this room this season.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think there's going to be, I guess I could call it a running back by committee.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe that's the right word, running back.
No, it is.
Yeah,
it definitely is.
It's because I think there's going to be several different combinations of what you'll see at running back this season. And it's a good point to bring up some of the physicality of some of these players, talking about Brian Bonner, but I think there's going to be an increased role for a guy like Ansu Sano or Julian McMahon situationally, because this running back room is going to need that. I mean, Scotty Graham has talked about it a lot this offseason. This is like a track speed running back. It's built on speed right now. One of the first things he said this spring was that they could win the NCAA 4x100 relay because of the speed that they have. So I'm interested to see the young players and what they can do in terms of their physicality in the running back room. But also, what does Jayden Limar look like? We haven't seen him. He can run between the tackles. He did so at Oregon. They run a little bit less zone than Washington does, so I want to see how quickly he can kind of make those decisions in the zone run scheme. That's a really important thing where I thought Adam Muhammad took a big step late in the 2025 season, where you could see him running with more confidence, more decisiveness. That's going to need to come from a guy like Jayden Limar to lead this running back room if he wants to get, take the majority of those carries, because this is an offense that runs zone 80% of the time when they run the football.
No, I love where you're going with that. And something where, Adam Muhammad certainly was a tremendous talent in what this scheme needed specifically. And it's why I'm so interested for a Brian Bonner, a Quaid Carr, where it's guys where that wasn't their game, but it's very clear from what we saw during spring ball, they can make it such a bigger part of what they want to do. And that's why Washington went out and recruited these guys and brought them in. And, as it pertains to the transfer portal and everything we just talked about, we'll see who's able to get that production and take that next step forward in a room where, if we see 3 guys have 70 plus carries, that's not going to shock me. And then 4 with Damon Williams as well, because that's such a big part of this as well. And I think that having a guy like that eases the load a little bit in terms of having an extra threat like that in the backfield at all times can make things easier on these running backs, because after Jonah Coleman was the focal point of opposing defenses last year, now it's Damon in the running game. So that changes the approach, that changes how the read option can be called, it changes how it can be blocked. I think there's so many things about that just need to be considered as part of all of this. And it also just helps when you have a really solid offensive line, and Champ Taulealea is going to be a huge part of that. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at Game Time. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events you want without the usual hassle. And this is something that's fun when Nick Lemkau is sitting right here next to me, because him and I went to a Mariners Red Sox game a couple of months ago, and Game Time is so awesome. It helps you find the best seats at the best prices. One thing I love about it is the Game Time zone deals, where you pick the section, Game Time chooses the seats, and you save even more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. So, Nick, it was really, I think, somewhat refreshing to hear that Champ Taulealea is pretty much the choice at starting right guard, where Jedd Fisch gets up on the podium and says, oh, we're going to have a sophomore right guard. He was saying something like that a little bit earlier as well, and obviously without naming it. And I don't mean that as a slight to Kieran Hatchett, who's going to be a very, very important player on this team. But I think it speaks so much more to just, again, what we've talked about throughout the show, the messaging and what we've heard about what the plan is for this program for the long term, because that's a dude at 6'4", 350 pounds, that was certainly as physical as they come when we saw him on the field last year. And then on top of that is just a guy that fits the identity of what this offense wants to be in terms of the running game between the tackles, because that's a dude who can clear out holes and is athletic enough to run this wide zone scheme as well.
And he played the entire spring. He was the starting right guard all of spring, and that's very important. And unfortunately, Kieran Hatchett was injured early, so he didn't get to play a lot. But, he served as like kind of a player coach, almost like a GA or something. Yeah. Thought he did a really good job.
He was having a lot of fun with that.
And he's going to be, like you said, he's going to be an important factor in the growth of this offensive line, because he's played 7 years going into 7th year of college football. Yeah. So, he's played a lot of football, a few different schools. So that's going to be a big component of that. But as far as Champ Taulealea is concerned, last season at the end of the year, offensive line coach Michael Switzer talked about how they did prioritize getting him more snaps towards the end of the season for a situation like this where he could come in and potentially compete at that right guard spot. Well, now it looks like he's probably going to win that competition just because of the way he was available all month of April. So that's a very big step for Champ in his development. And this offensive line looked pretty solid with him at the right guard spot. I thought, similar thing that we've said with Cody Green, you didn't really notice him, but in a good way, not in a bad way. Like making his blocks. Yeah. I think he's quick like that. He's 6'5", can really move really well at that position. So yeah, I mean, he's going to be a factor this season. And I think that's important that he got those reps last year, redshirting going into his because he's a redshirt freshman now. He has those few games of experience. The snaps late in the year, I think, will really translate. And then all month of April, he was able to be out there playing at a high level. So I think that really bodes well for the offensive line.
I'm still getting used to the fact that, yes, you're right, he is a redshirt freshman, but that isn't a thing anymore.
Yeah.
A friend of mine sent me something the other day that was like, oh, these are the new terms, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, fifth year. Like, no, I don't like that. No,
yeah, you're right. I should have caught that. Yeah, I guess he technically redshirted last year.
Yeah,
but now he's no longer that. So.
Exactly. He burned his red shirt in the non-traditional way of they don't exist anymore. It's still uncomfortable. But no, it's something where with this offensive line, it all of a sudden, because you look at it where Landon Hatchett can go off to the NFL draft after this year. We know Drew Party will be off to the NFL draft after this year. And then you still look at what you would have coming back in 2027, and it plays into the youth conversation that we were having earlier this week. And it plays into what we've been talking about all offseason of the talent level on this roster. You have all of a sudden 3 experienced guys coming back next year, a pair of juniors in John Mills and Champ Taulealea, and a sophomore in Cody Green, all 3 of whom were blue chip recruits as well, which certainly is a factor in this discussion. But again, on top of that, it's that continuity. And it's something that Jedd and I talked about earlier, where he just said, yeah, these years go by quickly in college football. And you talk about Desmond Roebuck and saying, yeah, people would tell me he looks old now. And he's a sophomore.
He certainly carries himself like a veteran, like what I was saying.
Oh, absolutely,
earlier.
yeah.
It's impressive the way that he really carries himself like he's played college football for 4 seasons. It's impressive.
Oh, 100%. And that's part of this, right? But that's the whole point, is that these years go by so quickly, and all of a sudden these guys are at the door. These guys are gone. Yeah. Obviously, it'll be a little different for some people in the 5-for-5 sort of scenario now, but that's how you build that continuity with, okay, yeah, we have these established pieces, because Colt Dietrich can step in and start next year if need be. That's great. That's that portal piece that we're talking about too. But you look all over the field and you see youth and you see guys that can be part of this program for 2, 3, 4 more years and just still be that we've seen be productive already very early in their careers and just continue that moving forward.
And I was going to bring up Colt Dietrich anyway, just because, like I've said numerous times, the fact that this team has a true 6th guy, I think makes a big difference for what this offensive line can be.
6th and a 7th too.
6th and a 7th, exactly, when you factor in Guerin. So
that was not a 6-7 joke for anybody out there who's calling us out on those, which does happen.
It's a very quality amount of depth. When I look back to this 2024 team and the struggles that it had on the offensive line, it's night and day what the 2026 team is going to have. And it's why John Mills comes out in February and says they want to win the Joe Moore Award. I think that's a big statement, because we still have to see what that's going to look like this season and how it all comes together. But when you have a Landon Hatchett at center who really took his game up a step, he allowed 22 pressures, I believe it was, in 2025. Last season, I think he only allowed 6. And then you look at...
Are you saying 2024 to 2025?
From 2024 to 2025.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good.
Good catch. And then same with Drew Party, who his 2024 season was one of the worst on the team. I think his PFF grade was in the high 40s. And
it was one of the worst in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and he brought that up a big step. He gave up 7 sacks in 24 and then only gave up, I think it was 1 in 2025. So really solid step for him. And that kind of thing, when you look at, like we talk about these young players coming in, when you have players that have gone through that kind of developmental process, learned from their mistakes, taken their game up a level, and really improved at their position along the offensive line. Think about what that can do for a guy like Champ Taulealea, who could step in as a starter, Cody Green, who's going to be a first-year starter, and then some of the recruits that are going to come in and have come in that maybe won't play this season. When you can see tangibly the players that have taken that step and how they can do it with this coaching staff that doesn't have very much turnover at all.
Yeah.
So that's another piece of this consistency, this continuity that this staff has, I think really can go a long way in terms of your offensive line development, because this offense is going to need that.
Nick, before we get out of here, let's do a quick hitter each. What's one more thing you learned today?
Well, I'm looking forward to what I'm going to learn. We get Jedd Fisch a little bit later, the official podiums. I thought it was really interesting, the notion that Jedd Fisch brought to the podium of continuing to build this team through the NFL draft, the recruiting process. To me, that's really important. You want to maintain that as your foundation. So to hear Jedd having said that back in 2024, and then to bring that, and it's kind of the same message today.
Yeah.
I really think that that's an important thing. To me, it tells me that the staff is all on the same page about the continuity of what they want this program to be year over year. They're not really changing their sights there. I think that's really important. Even though it's just a small comment that he made, I think that really speaks a lot about what they want to do.
So I love where you're going with that. I want to go with an on-field thing here, because I asked Jedd Fisch this morning about what the Y tight end position is going to look like. And it's very interesting when you've brought up Baranaone a lot. I've been big on Kakua Mua.
Yeah.
The first name out of his mouth in terms of who Washington is expecting to see in that bigger blocking role this year is Decker DeGraff. And it's not something where it's, we don't think he can do that or anything like that. But Jedd told me that Decker is up to 253 pounds at this point in time. And that's, to quote Jedd, bigger than Quinton Moore was. So that's a really interesting thing that I'm curious to see how that's going to work. He was very complimentary of Baranaone as well. And so it's something that the more I look at what this team is going to look like and what this offense is going to look like, especially in terms of running the ball and that specific role, which was so important because we heard Jedd Fisch call him Quinton Moore, that is, the best blocking tight end he's been around in college football. Like that's not necessarily a small thing to replace. And having those guys, having Cade Eldridge back, I think that this running game there are going to be a lot of questions about it, right? No doubt. We just spent a whole bunch of time talking about that. But I think that if Decker takes that step forward as a blocker, that really opens up this offense in a lot of ways.
And I was digging for my roster. I can't find it, but I was going to compare the size. You mentioned the weight that he's up to now. When you look at this tight end room, they're all like 6'5", 250, 260. Like Decker DeGraff doesn't really look like that because he kind of plays the position like a wide receiver, something I think Baranaone does as well, just because of their natural instincts to catch the football. But it's a tight end room that's really got quality size across the board. So they can really, if Decker can take that step as a blocker on the end of the line of scrimmage, that really goes a long way because this team can do two phases at that position going into the season.
Nick, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all you everydayers out there for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. And stay tuned on Monday when Landon Hatchett, Damon Williams, and Spencer McLaughlin, who's sitting right over there, all join this show. And until then, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell, and Spencer continues to wave at me over there. And hi Spencer. Thank you. I'm still recording over here. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And like I said, make sure you tune in on Monday. That's going to be a blast.